All right, now we are live on Proline TV for the Ourlads Football Network. We are going to talk Miami Dolphins, and that means Jason Sarney is with us, the Dolphins Wire. How's it going, Jason?
Going well, Greg. Hope all is well with everyone out there, and it's always a pleasure to talk football with you, sir.
Yes, it's always cool to talk to a fellow AFC East analyst where we can be cordial, even though, there'd be a lot of Dolphin, Jet fans or friends who might not be so cordial, but we are, because we're kind of used to all the losing. Maybe when we both get success again, then we can have some fun jabs at, big game, another big rivalry matchup between the Jets and the Dolphins, and just hasn't been that way for a while. It's been a long time since that one of those games has meant anything for both teams.
I don't think we're seeing a mud bowl anytime soon. No. So that's probably the last time. But
yeah,
I was about 4 weeks away from being born for that game, for not to age me. But anyway.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm not
3
old.
weeks, whatever it is.
I remember that one myself. When I was young, though, I was able. And I was obviously very disappointed, like most Jet fans. But anyway, that was the strike season, right?
You would know more than me.
Yeah, that was the strike season. They played Washington in the championship, and Washington beat the Dolphins, as you know. But yeah, that was the strike season. So it was one of those deals where it still wouldn't have mattered, but it is what it is. Anyway, that's some reminiscing of two long-suffering fans. This is not the time to talk about the Jets. It's time to talk about the Dolphins and the Dolphins suffering. Even though we were just saying, Jason, it's just a couple of years ago, it looked like this was one of the teams that you buy stock in. It's like it looks like they found the right coach. The quarterback has some, excitement in his game, and you know how hard it is to find a franchise quarterback. And then all of a sudden, like a year later, and everything is kind of changed. It's like a 180. You could talk. By the way, you're muted.
It's like I'm at a loss for words. It's like things were progressing, but it's almost like they were figured out. McDaniels, the motion, Tua in terms of getting after Reed too. Things were kind of figured out there. And, of course, the health. You can't be a good football team if the franchise quarterback is not in every game. And, yeah, they had the 1 year where he was healthy. You saw the capabilities. The ability is there, but the availability has to be there. And, of course, there's the drama that comes with, certain excellent players and what, the off-field versus the on-field. But, unfortunately, the trajectory did stop, and Dolphin fans could really only hope that it's like kind of a plateau at worst, but we may be heading in for a valley or two. So buckle up, Dolphin fans.
Want to remind everybody, because one of the big reasons why it's great to have these interviews with team analysts like Jason is because our draft review guide over at ourlads.com, this is last year's. So this year's is coming out next month. Link in the description on demand of the video. You can check it out. You can order the draft guide. It'll be available, I believe, late in June. So this will give you a breakdown of all 32 teams, basically a little note on each player drafted, as well as the key free agents, UDFAs, and so forth. And that's what we're going to discuss here on the program. But before we do that, Jason, you were talking about some of this drama, and I guess let's start in order. Should we go with the biggest story in Miami, and that would be Jalen Ramsey?
That's a great place to start, because hopefully while we even talk, there is chance that the final chapter could officially be written in Miami for Jalen Ramsey. Look, once the word mutually agreed or mutually parted, once that terminology is used, which it was last week with defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver, it's a matter of when and who. It's not a matter of if. Jalen Ramsey will be traded. He's not in OTAs. And it's a matter of what they could probably get for a veteran defensive back, but really still could be near the top of the heap in terms of what he still brings to the table. He still has a lot of football left in him. It's just not going to be played in Miami. It's just hopefully going to be for relatively decent compensation. And there's probably 2 or 3 teams really in the mix.
Better be in the NFC. Don't you be trading him out of the AFC.
Yes. That is something that Grier does a lot of business generally. There's definitely a good sprinkle of NFC teams that he's had a history of business with. Now, he had business with the Rams when he acquired Jalen Ramsey, who are a team right now that may be in the mix to get him back. Of course, a lot of give and take literally has to go with what a fair compensation is.
Okay.
But I put 2 other NFC teams in. Justin Mello, a colleague who writes for the Draft Network, wrote an article where he pinpointed the Commanders and the Cowboys as potential destinations. The Commanders make a heck of a lot of sense because there are plenty of years left on a rookie quarterback that hit already with Jaden Daniels. Yeah. So there's money to be played with to go get a star like a Jalen Ramsey. Is the draft capital going to be something that's for someone as good as Jalen Ramsey? Let's remember that they did technically steal him with paying a relatively low draft pick, a 3rd, I believe, and Hunter Long, tight end. That was a 3rd round pick. So you never know what the market will call back for Miami to basically recoup prior losses to trading for Ramsey. It did not work out.
So I'm assuming then that the contract, there's no issue with trading him. There's not going to be it's not a big deal there.
That's part of it. I mean, that's part of it. It's a matter of what money the Dolphins are going to eat on top of accepting the compensation. Now, what Chris Grier has done in other deals is make deals before a deal. What I mean by that is sometimes he's generated some capital to do business elsewhere. And when he made the trade this past April in the draft with trading out, he traded up in the 2nd round to get Jonas Savaiinaea from Arizona, offensive tackle or offensive guard rather. He was going to play in the NFL. And then in the 4th round, he traded out with the Houston Texans, and he moved back into the 5th. And he also required a 2026 3rd round pick. Now, I've been hoping that is parlayed to dangle that with Jalen Ramsey to simply upgrade the pick 32 rungs. If you're a Rams team, specifically them, they own 2 first rounders. They're not in the 4th round. They have enough capital where they can maybe take their 2nd round, downgrade it a step to a Dolphins 3rd, not lose anything in net selections.
Yeah.
So it's basically the Dolphins knowing, or Grier hopefully knowing, if the Rams are a partner again, that, all right, we're going to eat some money. We're not going to ask you to lose a pick. We're giving you back the pick. Look, you want to go to a Super Bowl? We just want to make this pick 60 to 62 instead of 94 to 95 or 6.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that's the route that they decide to go.
Any chance that it'll be a player for player type of deal, sort of like, because I'm not even sure what the heck is still going on in Green Bay. I mean, I don't know whether or not they're going to, whether or not that is still. So is that a possibility or do you think that the Dolphins really, this is just about recouping some sort of draft capital? That's the most important thing that you think Grier is looking for, instead of trying to bring in a player like an Alexander or someone else that could help him right now, right away.
Well, hopefully it's the cake and eat it too mindset where you're saving money with the money that you get back, which pretty much after the cap that they would have to eat versus dead money, maybe they're recouping $3 to $5 million this year, or whatever the math works out. They could recoup a couple of million. They'll have to deal with dead cap, but hopefully they can obtain a pick too. I don't think they're importing a salary to wash it.
Okay.
I think they are in, let's build up capital. Let's also save as much money as we need. Because what they also need to do, and we'll probably talk about this with another player scenario going on, they might need to find a couple of $1 million to keep another player home who is a quality player who had a record-breaking year for them last year.
Okay, well, let's talk about that player. And so when did the Jonnu Smith news all of a sudden become news?
Well, there's a lot going on in the football world right now. No, there's not. It's the summer. It's just the start of the summer. So everyone's got that, all right, we're almost here. but there is business to be done. And people are going to talk about an Adam Schefter tweet when he simply states a few days ago, the Dolphins were sorting after trade partners. I was you have to understand, we all have to understand what happened here. Jonnu Smith did not request a trade. Jonnu Smith reportedly requested a renegotiation of a deal to hopefully keep him in Miami. Look, he's going to be 30 years old. He's entering his 9th season. You know, there isn't a ton of mileage in the tank, but he's got the last year on a 2-year contract in which he came to Miami with last year. So the hope is a rework. Let's get another year. Let's make a little bit more money because he's the 32nd ranked paid tight end. And after, 80 plus receptions, 800 some odd yards, and 8 touchdowns, he needs to be above that rung as the last starting tight end paid in the NFL if you really want to get technical. So when the Dolphins heard reworking of deal, I want more money, the knee-jerk reaction lately has been, well, we're going to see if we can get a lottery ticket for you. And they went after a trade partner. They were talking with the Steelers, who hung up the phone. They were no longer interested. But now in the last 24 hours, 36 hours, there's a OTA injury with one of their tight ends, and now supposedly they're back in the mix. But there's a lot that has to go on with a lot of things before moves are made. I hope they stay and keep Jonnu Smith, because a lot of people think he was a 1-year journeyman with just one good statistical season. It's not necessarily the case. The Dolphins Twitter is all about, all right, either we're going to trade him for a pick, great, or, oh, no, we got to keep him. There's kind of a 50-50 split. But Smith fell into just such a perfect scenario last year after not really ever being in a perfect situation. The last good situation he was in was right before Miami, where he set career highs in targets, receptions, and yardage with Arthur Smith's Atlanta Falcons, and now Smith is in Pittsburgh, where you tie the dots between that. Prior, in New England 2 seasons, Smith was predominantly a second targeted tight end and 5th overall targeted pass catcher. He's got about 49 targets and 28 targets in his 2 seasons with the Patriots. So he's never really had an opportunity to be kind of the man, and look at what he did last year. And he's a leader. In this case, I really would hope the Dolphins kind of go a little off book and keep him as opposed to trading for a day 3 pick.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, well, okay. While we're on this roll with these players, and we'll put a nice little bow tie to it when we're done with it, but let's just roll on now, since we're doing this, to Tyreek.
Right.
So what's going on there? Because it's almost like I'm feeling, and again, obviously the outside point of view, well, wait a second. Now they're getting rid of Ramsey for sure. They may get rid of Jonnu Smith. And I'm looking at this tight end unit here, and there's nothing there that I could see if Jonnu Smith goes. And then you have Tyreek Hill. Why wouldn't the Dolphins just at that point say, let's kind of go with a 1-year rebuild and let Hill go, and we'll save money there, and Ramsey's gone and Smith is gone, and we'll try to just save money, put a lot into the next year's free agency and the draft, and then be good again in 2026.
That may very well be the mindset in theory, but the implementation might not be very easy specifically.
Oh, I can see, yeah.
With the Jalen Ramsey deal is one thing, but you ask also what kind of, and I hate to say it, what baggage comes with that. Tyreek Hill has a very big Louis Vuitton bag of baggage versus what could be a little,
100%
over the shoulder little for Ramsey. Not as much drama to come with Ramsey where there would be with Hill. So you're going to have to ask a team to eat money and take on the potential social media ramifications. The I'm going for 2,000 yards ramifications, which to me, I get it, would be great, but you know what? Has never ever happened in the NFL. So I'd like to see the rest of the targets be sprinkled with more player focus. 2,000. Other people might think that way. Other people might say, hey, we could sell some tickets. So is it 1,000 that he will not be traded?
We're losing you a little bit there, Jason. Did we lose you, Jason? hopefully we'll get Jason back here on our live show. We are going to go over the draft picks, by the way. We're going to go over all, what do we got? 8 picks for the Miami Dolphins. And we're going to break those down. We're going to break down the UDFAs and try to get a little bit of a report card point of view from Jason on the offseason, which to this point is nowhere near over, it seems, for the Miami Dolphins. So, see, we still lost Jason. Let me knock Jason off here. I'm not sure that's going to help any, but hopefully Jason will come back with a better signal, and we'll be back with him in just a minute. In the meanwhile, we're going to be live tonight at 7:30 for any of the Eagle fans out there. Or if you're just a general fan, you want to know what's going on with the defending champs. Anthony Miller is going to join us and talk about the Philadelphia Eagles at 7:30 tonight, right here on Proline TV, the Our Lads Football Network. And I think that's it for this week. We'll be back again next week when we're going to be talking about, I believe we have 4 interviews lined up next week, starting with the Chicago Bears on Monday with Mark Carman of CHGO Sports. All right, let's see if we've got Jason back. Jason.
Yeah, I'm on the phone. I am so sorry. Something's going down with the computer.
That's okay. I'm what you would call a professional, so I can handle a little bit of this. Anyway. Okay, Jason. So let's get back on Tyreek Hill, because we know how again, what you're saying, definitely going to be difficult. So give me your best impression of how you think it's going to shake down with Tyreek.
I think that they try to mend the fences and they get through this season, and hopefully they do. And hopefully he is productive, because he's still Tyreek Hill. He's still going to hopefully produce like he can, take attention away from a Jalen Waddle, a Devon Achane. So I do hope that they make bygones be bygones and just see what happens this season and play the best everybody can and make nice in the Tyreek Hill situation.
And so, because what you were saying makes a lot of sense, that it's going to be hard to trade him, because the only teams that would want to even potentially put up with some of this off the field stuff, and some of it's on the field, but most of it's off the field, is a Super Bowl contender and a team that Tyreek might even behave himself a little bit, knowing what's out there, because he's landing on a team with maybe even, a top flight quarterback, maybe a Super Bowl championship caliber quarterback, coach. So that kind of limits the number of teams that might be interested, if at all. So do you think that's part of it? Is that you can't really say that there are 31 other teams that you're going to be able to negotiate with?
1,000%. The market is very, very thin, if there even is a current market. So that's why, when you can cut bait next year, you might just have to kind of go on in and let's just throw caution to the wind here. Unless the team, I'll tell you what, if it's 4 weeks in, 5 weeks in, and the Dolphins do not have several wins, and God forbid a player goes down and they field a call, things could happen, Okay. But I would say that if the Dolphins are 2 wins deep into October, things are probably going to be vacated very soon, and they're going to unload.
And would you say that, and I know we've talked about this before, do you think part of the reason that there's this much noise going on at this, because again, this is kind of stuff that you would think that we would be talking about in March, late February, early March, before free agency, or even during, where you can make some moves before the draft. It's kind of weird that it's like, because again, I don't think there's any team besides the Dolphins that are dealing. I know teams have like one player they have to, whether it's Rodgers with Pittsburgh and Hendrickson with the Bengals and so forth. But 3 key players after the draft, the Dolphins are still wondering whether or not they're going to be trading. Does that go back to the front office more than anything? And we've talked, quite a bit about Greer and whether or not he's been there way too long and it's time for him to move on. And maybe that's really part of it. Or is this just kind of, hey, these are just not the right players, and that's really more of the issue?
It's almost like each player has a specific answer to those 3.
but the general concept with Greer and and his kind of running mate in the front office, Brandon Shore, salary cap guy, big time, contract and economics guru. If they're looking for a soft reset, retool, rebuild, whatever you call it, this is in their MO. Save the money, get a compensation pick, trade him, save the money, get a day 3 pick. We'll see what we could just try to hit on draft picks, but they're not necessarily retaining players to maximize their potential. But in these 3 cases, you have Tyreek Hill, who's got everything with him, and he did pretty much. You're a Jets fan, you remember that season. He took himself out of the game, last game of the year. I mean, truth be told, the Dolphins were eliminated the playoffs, sure, but whatever happened to getting the W, beating a rival, and going on into the offseason with a win and not a loser, and getting some more just, wow, we could do this. We were just a half a game short. He took himself out of the game. He did apologize. He did kind of go back on that, but he's also someone that said, quote, he doesn't deserve the captaincy in which he was voted on last year. And the Dolphins pretty much are down half their captains from last season, a couple of more from the previous season to last. So you're looking for leadership. Ramsey was a captain last year. Jonnu Smith is a guy who could easily be a captain this year and a leader. But again, in the specificity of these things, who asked for a trade? Jalen Ramsey. Who quit on the team and could be traded, but there's too much stuff to go with that potential trade? Tyreek Hill. What player wants to stay as a Dolphin, wants a little bit more money for time served and
deserves it?
Year?
Yeah.
John.
That makes more sense. That's why I was saying, it does seem like that these are 2 players, Hill and Ramsey, that I don't think we're very surprised to be hearing that this is what's going on, as opposed to Jonnu Smith, which probably should be looked at like a completely different situation. It just happens to be thrown in there because of what's going on with Ramsey and Hill. Okay, so if you had a guess with Smith and Hill, Smith stays or goes?
Wow. I think now you have Drew Rosenhaus representing him, and he does represent a good probably like 15 to 20% of Miami Dolphins.
Okay.
I really would be curious to see where he stands in keeping players home versus getting a better deal and letting them walk. 2 examples. He represented Emmanuel Ogbah when he was a free agent, kept him home. People might have thought he was going to take money elsewhere. That was a worry, but he got a great deal done. Andrew Van Ginkel, flip side, didn't necessarily get matched from the Dolphins, so Rosenhaus got him a hell of a deal with multiple teams, one of them being the Vikings. 2 teams he had a choice of, Van Ginkel. So this is a situation where I think that Rosenhaus hopefully could keep his client as happy as he can be, who wants to stay in Miami. But I believe it's the additional year. If you going into your 10th season to have that year home where you want to retire potentially to get just a little bit more money, do right by Jonnu. I think Drew is looking for that. That's just speculation. But if the Dolphins say, we're not going to meet that, good luck to you. We're going to trade you to here.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to do. But I hope, gun to head, they give Jonnu the extra year, come up a little bit, maybe, I don't know, 6.5, 7 million as opposed to the 4.5. But they got to get the Ramsey money off the books and use some of that to put. So it might be a boom boom, or just one boom and bunt.
But you would have to think that if the Dolphins felt that this was going to be an issue and a potential problem where they may have to trade Jonnu, that they would have taken care of it in the draft. We would have saw some sort of sign. Yeah. And since we didn't see a sign in the draft, this leads me to believe that, they'll take care of him.
Now, that's a terrific point, and I agree with you. And I'm not going to go sprinkle sugar on another yet undrafted free agent tight end, although it's a fun prospect in Jalen Conyers out of Texas Tech.
Sure.
But I'm not going down that road. The Dolphins have undrafted tight end, Julian Hill. Undrafted tight end, Tanner Connor. Blocking tight end, Farrell Brown. And they didn't take one of 5 startable day 1 ready tight ends in their first 2 or 3 picks. So you make a phenomenal point. But here comes another point. Now, I mentioned Drew Rosenhaus. He's the best in the business. Everybody knows this. If the Dolphins made one tiny call to a team and said, by the way, we're floating, what would you value Smith? We value this. They hang up the phone. That's the negotiation. That's the interest. It could be so simple as that, minuscule of a talk. It also is phenomenal negotiation tactics by an agent, mixed in with the fact that John wants to stay here.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. I kind of want to stay home,
Okay.
But the worst thing that I could say to Dolphin fans who want Smith is the Arthur Smith presence in Pittsburgh. And that was John's last head coach prior to Miami, where he did have career years before Miami, just the year prior. So I hate giving percentages. I've learned my lesson on that. I don't want to do that, but I would hope and pray this particular case. Look, I'll say it right out. During press conferences, Mike McDaniel and the brass, we want to win. We're looking for leaders. I would think that they're actually lying if they trade a leader who helps them win in Jonnu Smith. That's just me.
Okay. All right. I think we're on the same page there. And we'll find out again about Hill. He's going to be tough, but anything's possible. And again, that's something that can happen at any time, or it just doesn't happen. And he's with the Dolphins. So, okay.
Another Drew Rosenhaus.
Yeah. It's sort of like how I know as a Washington Nationals fan, I get so, now this isn't a negative, but I get so sick and tired of hearing whenever one of my young players has Scott Boras as an agent. It drives me freaking up the wall.
We got Boras.
It's just,
it's very similar. It's very,
because Boras is one of these guys that's like he'll advise his young client, no, they're going to ask you, they're going to try to give you a nice little contract early because it'll save them money in the long run. But no. We're going to hold on. You're going to play you're going to play hard, and you're going to, play for your big contract in 3 or 4 years. And when you get there, then we're going to price it out of Washington and you'll have to sign somewhere else. That's been the story of Boras clients with my baseball team, which is why I can't stand it whenever I hear that. So anyway, because James Woods is a client of Boras, and that's already what I'm hearing. So I'm not very happy. If you're into baseball, I'm not even sure how much of a baseball fan you are. So, okay.
Oh, I know the deal. I'm part of.
Oh yeah, the Marlins, of course. You're in Miami. We're in the same boat as far as not being able to compete financially. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the draft. And what did you think overall, right off the bat, Kenneth Grant? Because this was definitely an option that we had spoken about, but it wasn't one of your early on. I know we talked about it before free agency. It was a top 5 need, but it wasn't towards the top. So to get Grant, though, I don't think it was a big surprise. Michigan maybe ties as well. But what do you think? What was your initial impression on that? Considering that was a need, no question. But was there another player out there that the fan base was really looking for? Maybe tight end might have been one of them. But was there another position or another player that the fans were preferring?
There were a couple in the mix, and I will say that Grant was always a guy that I thought would be the safest pick for the Dolphins. I was in the camp that would have loved to trade back and still land him in 18, 19, 20. But as a player, was always sold that he would be a very safe, fine, celebrated pick. I'm in that camp, very pleased with the pick. Even more so that Chris Greer had the conviction to go get him when he wanted him, even if it was 5 to 7 selection spots earlier. People want the Ty Warren, but of course, you got Twitter GMs out there. The Ty Warren wasn't the first tight end selected. So he might not have been the number 1 guy to even hope for in Colton Loveston, who went to Indy. I'm sorry, who went to Tyler Warren went to Indy. Loveston, Chicago. Thank you. But another player, if he was not injured at all, Will Johnson from Michigan with the Ramsey injury would have made sense. However, every single team got spooked until the card, let's take a flyer. But that was the only other guy, if he was healthy, that could have been tagged a blue chip immediate player. Again, injury. That's probably the only reason why he wasn't in the mix.
Absolutely.
From Miami. So
yes,
very happy. Grant, major need. And I think he could be a day 1 factor pairing on the defensive line with a bit of versatility, with Zach Sealer, because they took care of the defensive line this draft that we'll talk about. but they weren't entering into a crowded room at all, these rookies. So they'll all be in the mix this season.
Yeah, I mean, we might as well go ahead and stay at defensive line. So they had to wait till round 5, but they added Phillips in round 5 and then came back and got Biggers with their last pick in round 7. So as you can see there on the depth chart in purple, or actually we call that purple, with a three-man line. These 3 guys take up almost half of the line, and they're only rookies. So that's going to be a pretty interesting impact. Phillips is an interesting guy. I will say that. I like Phillips. I think to get him in the 5th round was nice. What do you think about the whole package there?
Phillips, the sky is the limit with him. He's going to be 21 at the end of the month. And he was spoken to rave reviews on a latest edition of a Miami Dolphins podcast, Drive Time with Travis Wingfield. Mike Loxley, head coach of Maryland. So Jordan's former collegiate coach was saying that this is the first guy in the locker room. And what he's not doing in the locker room is setting up his social media account, showing people, hey, I'm in the locker. No, that's just part of his MO and taking care of his business. He's the kind of guy that has the wrestling background for lower leverage to take up double teams, to push the A gap back and allow others to get tackles for losses, maybe get to the quarterback. Please don't look at numerical statistical production with Jordan Phillips. That's not his game. His game is allowing others to eat. And yet again, 21 at the end of this month, he has so much of his best football left. And that's a direct quote from the head coach Loxley, who had a couple of years of him after he was a Tennessee prospect and then, transfer portaled over to Maryland. But this is a really good 5th round draft pick that his former coach said was an absolute steal for the Dolphins in the 5th.
Yeah, Loxley loves the kid, and we'll see. He'll be a long time player, no question, in this league. What about Biggers? Again, you get him in the 7th round. What Dolphins say? Any particular reason what they liked about him?
Yeah, I mean, the Dolphins, in a sense, they were looking for size, looking for production, and looking for leadership on both the offensive and defensive trenches. Check off all the boxes for what they did overall on getting tougher on the lines moving out. Biggers is a guy at Georgia Tech. He even got in on some special teams work. He's 6'6". He's got a basketball background. A lot of these rookies are multi-sport athletes. So he's got that athleticism. Look for Biggers to be a guy who could be almost like an Emmanuel Ogbah or Calais Campbell in getting his hands up on the ball. If you can't get to the quarterback on 3rd down, a batted ball is almost as efficient. So I think he's someone who could work in well, significant snaps, maybe not a ton, but this is a room where all these rookies are going to be seeing playing time because they could very easily be 2, 3, 4 on the depth chart behind Sealer. I like Phillips as a nose. He could be a little versatile. Biggers more so on like the 3 tech, but Biggers is an intriguing 7th round draft pick.
How do you see right now? How do you see the line looking? We know Sealer. So he's the real deal up front out of everybody. But again, we're dealing with rookies. But the way that our lads has their depth chart set, do you think that would be correct? Do you think that week 1, who do you think are the 3 guys lining up on that defensive line? Sealer and who else? Grant obviously has to be. So who's that 3rd guy?
Yeah. Well, right now, you got Benito Jones, who was a great undrafted story. Look, you're going to hear UDFA a lot when people talk about the Dolphins. They dip into that pool a lot, and he was one who a couple of years ago he went to Detroit. He came back. I like Benito Jones, but Jordan Phillips could have a phenomenal summer, but I don't know if they're going to start 2 rookies on the defensive line. So I'm going to put Jones in there.
Okay.
But Anthony Weaver loves the rotation, keeping people fresh.
Sure.
So starter. Great snap count. That's what I'm looking for.
All right. Now, let's tell you what, stay on defense and let's go to the secondary where we have the 2 5th rounders, Trader and Marshall, a couple of juniors. What did you think about those picks? And what have you heard from the staff as far as why they wanted both of those kids on the team?
You hear the word leadership a lot with these guys. I mentioned it with Phillips, but you're going to get it tenfold with guys like Marshall and Trader Jr. I'll start with Marshall. He's a local Miami high school product who went to the University of Florida, was not only a 4-year starter there, but he checked the SEC's #1 receiver on the other side. So anytime they were going up against an LSU, anytime they were going up against top tier talent, Georgia, he was checking the top target. So that's Marshall. He's a very good, get his hands on the ball kind of corner in coverage, but he couldn't translate 25 passes defended into a plethora of picks. He got a pair of interceptions, I believe, across his career, but he's good size, he's physical, and that leadership has already been shown in OTAs. Dolphins cornerbacks coach already speaking very highly of him, and really another guy who I think in a cornerback room could play significant snaps as a rookie, because they were a kind of a tough group to talk about, even if you want to include Jalen Ramsey. So taking Ramsey out, Greg, there is not one person that I can guarantee is a top 1 or 2 boundary corner on this team when Ramsey leaves. So yeah, Marshall's got as good as opportunity as anybody to start as a rookie.
Trader?
And Trader. Whoops. And Trader Jr. is so good that he's caused my phone to drop because he hit me.
That's how excited you are about him. Yeah.
Sport athlete at Maryland. Lacrosse is a better sport at Maryland than football, and he was, I think, the 9th ranked lacrosse prospect a few years ago coming into the Terrapins. So he's got both of those sports under his belt. Loxley raved about Trader Jr. as well. The leadership, being the quarterback of the defense, having the anticipatory skills to, take risks and not lose on those or even have minimal mistakes. But he's a kid who kind of echoes Phillips' leadership and work ethic. And the safety group is another group. They have a number of names, but they said goodbye to Javon Holland. You missed on last year's free agent with veteran rival Jordan Poyer. So the safety group is another one that a rookie can conceivably take one of those first 2 spots and see significant time. Trader is going to certainly see time on special teams. He was a starter on every special teams unit, and Loxley even said he goes against starting a starter in every special teams role, because there are several, in coverage and, in protection, what have you. So he started in all of them. So this is the guy who's going to see the field regardless of the phase.
Okay. Let's now switch over to offense for the other 3 picks. And let's start at the top. 2nd-round draft pick, Savaiinaea from Arizona. I heard early on, and again, I don't know whether that was, I think it was more early on in the week, Senior Bowl week. He had some struggles, some issues, seemed to correct them a little bit later on. But the Dolphins really liked the kid, so they went and got him. What really excited them the most about him?
Well, again, they wanted to get tougher in the trenches. And when you make your first 2 picks, defensive and offensive trench, using a trade to get Savaiinaea, this is a guy who has, familiarity with Tua, from a locational standpoint. I think they went to the same school. I don't know if they didn't play together, but there's familiarity, and right away he's excited to be a protector of Tua. Whether that will be on the right guard slot or the left guard slot remains to be seen. But what that pick does is gives the Dolphins a chance to have 5 starting offensive linemen that stay the 5 starting offensive linemen. They have not been able to get consistency across the group. And of course, with Teron Armstead retiring, you have last year's 2nd-round pick, Patrick Paul, who you're throwing into the mix after a rookie season of just 30% of the snaps. So do they want to put Savaiinaea next to a inexperienced developmental 2nd-year player? Because they also James Daniels, a veteran guard who has versatility across the line. So, let's see where they slot each of those guards. But Savaiinaea is going to help equally in the run game. He's athletic enough to get out to the 2nd level to help a guy like a Devon Achane, Jalen Wright, another draft pick that the Dolphins selected, in Ollie Gordon. We'll talk about him later too. But I'm excited to see the pass protection and to see how he helps that aspect of letting Tua just make a couple of few progressions and just get the ball out quickly with keeping him upright. He does have a very quick release Tua. It's not necessarily offensive line protection. It's more so, doing it properly and getting through the run aspect of the offensive line as well. But I think Savaiinaea is a guy who could do adequately and even more in both phases. So let's see where they put him. But I think they have their 5.
What is
Paul, Savaiinaea, and Austin Jackson and James Daniels.
Okay. And so we're looking at the right 5 there. And would Paul be the biggest question mark?
If Paul plays well and he can say that he is developing the right way, 2nd-round pick from 2024, and he's not doing anything to regress, I would say that he is the biggest question mark because what Aaron Brewer could bring to the table. He had a phenomenal year last year at center. Austin Jackson was hurt last year at the end of it, but he was playing fine in the year previous at right tackle. And I do have high hopes for Savaiinaea. And James Daniels has proven he can do it as well. So, the biggest question mark and asterisk where if this guy hits, they could be a very good line is Patrick Paul.
Okay. And if a player were to go down, which position, as far as the backups are concerned, would you be the most apprehensive about? I hope we don't lose this guy.
There's not one person I can name with confidence who's that swing tackle or swing guard. Plus Kendall Lamb to the Eagles in free agency. Supposedly he was going to retire, but he's not going to be with the Eagles. Liam Eichenberg is still there as a swing guard, which is nightmares to some Dolphins. They have guys who have not proven themselves yet, practice squad potential players, undrafted rookies. So I'm not very excited about having to speak about who the 6th or the 7th or the 8th guys are. Let's see what happens in training camp, but they better hope that everybody stays healthy. I'll say
and
that.
We're going to talk about the UDFAs when we're done here. I'm actually surprised that there aren't more offensive linemen UDFAs on the Dolphins. I would have thought this would be a really good spot for some of these UDFAs to get there and to say, hey, I got a chance. I can be the backup. I can be one injury away from starting on this team. But that's just the way it went. So we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So let's go to the final 2 picks, the skill position players. And these are actually 2 of the better draft picks that I think the Dolphins had. And to be able to get these guys where they landed is just amazing to me. Starting with Ollie Gordon. And I get the whole Ollie Gordon deal as far as I know what happened to him this year. He had the DUI incident before the season started, gets off to a slow start. Oklahoma State had a bad year, but then he slowly kind of got back going again. But the kid was a monster for the 2 previous years and looked pretty good to me at the Senior Bowl. So I automatically said, whoever gets this guy, he could be, one of the sleeper running backs of the entire draft.
I agree. I'm not telling fantasy players that he's your number 1 starter in the next couple of weeks. The Dolphins do have a tandem in Achane and Wright that I hope that they utilize, much so how they kind of utilized Raheem Mostert and Achane from 2 years ago. But what Gordon brings to the table is a 3-pronged approach at being a specialist. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's got 80 collegiate receptions. He could be a 3rd and short, 4th and short, kind of push the pile forward, run straight ahead kind of guy that the Dolphins did not seem to want to do last year, both for personnel reasons on short yardage and, Mike McDaniel's love for going outside, utilizing speed. But Gordon is the guy that could, go over a pile or push the line to get a first down. He also can pass block. Or he's very willing at pass protection. So he can see significant snaps in a specialized role as a 3rd running back.
Yeah. The funny thing is that there are a lot of little issues I see depth-wise on the Dolphins, but they're stacked at running back. It's just one of these things where it's like, man, I could see 4 guys along the running back room. Any of them could start, and I think you'd be fine. And so that's, I guess that's a good luxury to have, but who knows? Maybe that gives you a trade chip to fill another position. And then we go to Ewers. So here is a guy that a year ago, everybody was looking at as a surefire first-round draft pick. And then he gets hurt. And last year played with an injury. And I don't know if you found out anything about what he had to deal with last year. But it was one of those things where you could tell that even though he was playing, something was wrong. He was not the same player that he was in 2023. And look where he ends up. So what have you found out about why he lasted so long? And is this a situation where with a quarterback like Tua, who hopefully will have a nice career, long career, we all know that it could end immediately, that being able to get a talented kid like this in round 7 is a pretty nice deal if it works out.
I mean, for sure, when you look for what he was drafted as, a lot of people thought the Dolphins were going to draft a quarterback for direct competition with Tua. But right now I see this as a direct competition with backup Zach Wilson for that job. You know, you bring in a former first-round pick in Wilson who had a decent developmental scenario in Denver. They spoke highly of him. So you ink Wilson to a couple of million deal to back up Tua. But you draft Ewers, who's got a great arm, very big arm talent, developmental for sure, has to cut down on his mistakes. But to battle for potential to back up as a rookie, or if at worst, just kind of practice squatted for those developmental reasons. I mean, look, for a 7th round pick for a flyer, absolutely. Obviously, the Dolphins missed on the 7th round with the Skylar Thompson, who ironically is now in Pittsburgh, speaking about them again. But I think Ewers is a much, much, much heavier talented prospect, clearly, than a Skylar Thompson. Very good move, very good pick. We don't want to be talking about a rookie taking over for Tua Tagovailoa this season. You know, at least in my mind.
No.
You know, the second coming of not a 7th round pick, and this is not Tom Brady. So I hope he battles in camp and you start hearing maybe he's better than Zach Wilson. That would be a huge win for me.
First step.
But I'm overexceeding maybe.
So you haven't heard anything though yet. Still too early. There hasn't been anything about whether or not he was injured last year or why he dropped so much. Has he had time to have any long one-on-one interviews or anything like that, or it's too early?
I think it's a little too early. You know, I guess the curtain hasn't been kind of revealed on everything Quinn Ewers yet, slowly but surely. And I'll tell you what, you know, knowing, you know, the way things are done, this is the quarterback. So there's a little bit of, you know, we're not going to get him necessarily to the podium just yet. But a couple of rookies have been interviewed, a couple of coaches, a couple of veterans, but still waiting for a little bit more spice on the Ewers side of things.
Okay, sounds good. All right, UDFAs. So let's start on offense. And the ones that stick out to me based on players that I thought, you know, could have been drafted late or had good college careers, you have, let's see, actually 5 guys. You've got Armstrong, Weiss, the receivers. You've got West at center. You've got Conyers, you've already mentioned, at tight end, and Knoll at running back. West and Weiss, to me, stick out the most. But because of the tight end room, Conyers could be interesting. Starting on offense, which UDFAs have you heard of, whether they got, you know, big contracts to land there, or whether or not they've already looked good in rookie camp or OTAs or whatever? What have you been hearing the most positive that you think maybe one of these guys, 1 or 2 of these guys could make the 53-man, or definitely look at as practice squad candidates that could end up as a part of the team later this season or next year?
Sure. No, great question. And they once again brought in a number of UDFAs. I'm looking at taller wide receivers, and that's Theo Weiss from Missouri and Andrew Armstrong from Arkansas. Both very intriguing players. Armstrong is kind of that vertical threat who can go up and get it at the high point, the apex of the ball in the air. While Weiss might be able to pick up first downs a little bit more, kind of like chain moving and over the middle of the field. Good hands, tough yardage earner who could get, you know, physical in the blocking game as well. So I'm very curious to see if those guys are battling for maybe a 5th or 6th wide receiver spot, depending how many they carry. they did sign the Dolphins Nick Westbrook-Kine, who is a taller wide receiver, but he's really that only one cut in that model. Okay. So if I have to put a chip on it, I'm going to put Andrew Armstrong from Arkansas as maybe a guy who sneaks on in from the wide receiver group.
Okay. Anybody else regarding the rest of those offensive players? West, you talked about Conyers. Anyone else?
Yep. I'm looking at B.J. Adams from the cornerback room because, listen, if you're talking undrafted free agents, the cornerback room is where they find them in Miami. I'm not saying Pro Bowlers, but guys who could be potential starters. Going back to Nick Needham and guys like, Ethan Bonner and Storm Duck and Cater Kohu. There's always guys mentioned who are undrafted free agents. And B.J. Adams from University of Central Florida, tall, a lot of size, good coverage ability, and again, a boundary corner. And they don't have a surefire there. Cam Smith, a second rounder who hasn't done anything from 2003 up until this point, and a plethora, again, of undrafted free agents. Storm Duck and Cam Smith right now are your 1 and 2s. So it's open competition. So B.J. Adams has as good a chance as any other player there. Josh Preby, guard. Again, not confident in Liam Eichenberg's ability, so maybe you could look at guard. Addison West, I believe, is the center, and last year they brought in Andrew Mayer from UTEP as a undrafted free agent center who made the team, so there's going to probably be competition with those two guys. And yeah, those are the main positions. In Jalen Conyers from Texas Tech. Yeah, I would say those are some guys to circle. Eugene Asante, another guy.
I'm a fan of Asante.
Linebacker.
I like Asante.
Man, is he fast? If he could translate the speed into just
he can
being
hit.
Maybe at first a gunner or an ace on special teams or just hitting people, maybe he could eventually work his way into defensive linebacking snaps. But undersized, but is he fun to watch?
Yeah, definitely a player that I think has a shot. Okay, and before I wrap it up, give me give me like a general. It doesn't have to be a grade, but just your overall feeling on how the Dolphins offseason went. Would you say, I know you're not going to say positive, so give me some sort of, give me something else. Give me something that, again, if you want to give a grade, that's fine. Or if you just want to give me, an adjective or something of what kind of an offseason the Dolphins had.
Well, listen, they can call it whatever they want, but it's clear that they're trying to change their identity. And they did that with, 5 trench players. You got to build from the inside out, and the Dolphins have had issues on the offensive line. They traded up. They got a big guy in Savaiinaea to check that box off. They are letting, obviously, some of these veterans potentially go and building for next year. But I think that they are retooling their identity, trying to get a new mindset of Miami Dolphins football, not necessarily just speed, but power, physicality, and leadership.
So that's most important. And again, it sounds like they've gotten a jump start on that with some of those draft picks you mentioned. So yeah, it's going to be interesting as always. And I guess we're going to find out about Ramsey soon. And then maybe Smith right after, maybe the next day, based on what you're saying. Tyreek Hill, maybe we don't hear anything at all. That's possible up until especially training camp. So anyway, I think the Dolphins might be one of the more interesting teams to follow over the next few months before we even get to a regular season game. And I appreciate your time as always, Jason. It's good to catch up with you on the Dolphins. And when we talk again, we'll be talking about getting ready for the season and training camp. So for anybody out there that wants to check out your coverage, we're going to have links in the description of the video on demand. But tell them what they can find out regarding how much coverage that you're going to provide for the Dolphins for them.
Greg, I appreciate you having me. Thanks for everybody watching. You can find me at Dolphins Wire, Jason_Sarney on Twitter. But Greg, it's always a pleasure talking football with you, and hope you have a great summer.
You got it, Jason. Hopefully we'll have a better signal next time around. Thank you very much for putting this together on your phone. I appreciate that. I know how difficult that was. And we'll talk to you again in a few months.
Appreciate you very much, Greg. Thank you so much.
Take care, Jason.